And we're back in the room. 3 minutes after 10 is the time. A very good morning indeed to you. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where we will begin, I imagine, with, where do you want to begin? One of the things about taking a bit of time off, if you're just tuning in or you're listening to LBC for the first time and you're wondering who this Herbert is, I've just had a fortnight away. 2 weeks off work, and thanks to all of the people who did such a sterling job standing in for me while I was away. Tom Swarbrick, of course, most obviously, but also Angela Rayner, Wes Streeting, Jeremy Hunt, and I'm going to forget the other ones now, aren't I? Chris Bryant and Matt Hancock. Jeremy Hunt in particular, actually. I have to tell you, when I got back to work, my colleagues were speaking very warmly of him. It seems important to stress that, because I was quite surprised, I shall be honest with you, but hey-ho. You get this sense when you've been away for a while. You sort of see yourself as others see you. As it was Rabbi Burns that wrote that, wasn't it? Won't some gift the gifty gears to see ourselves as others see us? Don't at me, Scottish listeners. I appreciate I've not only made a complete horlicks of that quote, but also delivered it in appalling tones. But you see yourselves as others see us. A bloke in a frozen yogurt shop in Greece started talking to me about Boris Johnson, and he couldn't stop laughing. He genuinely couldn't stop laughing. This idea that there's anger towards us in France is pathetic. The world thinks we are ridiculous now. There's a German cartoon about replacements, and it just has two sets of clown shoes, one men's shoes and one ladies' shoes, saying there's a vacancy and who's going to be the next. And you sort of hate it because you're a proper patriot. If you love this country, then you hate what's being done to it by these people who remain in charge. You just find yourself looking at it with a curious mixture of pity and regret. So I have to tell you now, there is no prospect whatsoever, despite the utterly predictable scenes in Dover unfolding as we told you they would unfold, from precisely the point that Theresa May announced her ludicrous red lines. There is no likelihood today of Keith having to get the tin out, I don't think. There is an astonishing... Remember when I came on air just after Boris Johnson had finally been handed his sandwiches wrapped in a roadmap, and you were expecting quite an upbeat show, you were expecting quite an exuberant show, almost a celebratory show, and I was too, until the light came on, and then it felt not like that at all. It felt a curiously sad state of affairs, because of course it may be good news to wave goodbye to the worst Prime Minister this country has ever seen, but it's our country. I suppose it's a bit like a football manager, is it? Leaving, and although you still support the team, you realise that there's at least 5 years of work to be done before you can undo the damage that has been left behind. There's no real cause for celebration for people who genuinely like this country or genuinely love where they live. The idea that we would derive pleasure from the humiliation of Brexit voters now is just pathetic. It's such an odd character difference, isn't it? All of the people who spent the last 6 years giving it all, oh, you lost, get over it, and I love those Remainers, they really do derive pleasure from other people's misfortune or other people's unhappiness. You know, I see you get punched in the face and I go, oh, that's awful. That's really awful. I'm so sorry that you've been punched in the face. And you go, ha, 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 all of your Remainer tears. I've been punched in the face and it's really upset you. Ha, 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 I win. I mean, how do you get past that now that it's all unfolding so ploddingly, predictably in front? Anyway, listen, you may not believe me. You may be thinking that I've gone off on a bit of a tangent. Other stories in the news today. NHS vacancies have crashed through the 100,000 mark. Of course, the Brexit border rules are causing delays at Dover that have hit the 21-hour mark. Restaurants are closing. Closures of restaurants are up 64%, which is linked to both, of course, the cost of living crisis and the epic labour shortages. Boris Johnson's accused of trashing constitutional norms again, as he seems set to break even his own record for putting completely inadequate people in the House of Lords. Priti Patel was warned about passport backlogs last year. She did nothing. The government was also urged to increase staffing at the border posts in Dover, but it did nothing. I think they were asked for 33 million quid and they stumped up 300 grand or something. I mean, you just wherever you turn, it's embarrassing now. But of course, inevitably, and we're going to start with Dover in case you were wondering, it's inevitable that people are trying to pull the wool over your eyes again. The evidence of your eyes and ears. Oh, it's good to be back, by the way. It's not normal, is it, to get towards the end of your holiday and start itching to be back at work. I do appreciate how lucky I am to feel that way. And listen, I mean, if they'd offered me another week away, I'd have taken it, don't get me wrong. But you do find yourself, I need this outlet. I don't know whether it's therapeutic or something subtler than that. I need it. I guess that's why so many people like Twitter, because you get to vent your spleen. You get to actually feel seen or feel heard. You get to work stuff out and find people who possibly agree. Like, oh, man alive, I'm lucky to have this job. Seriously. I was sort of Thursday of last week, I got back from Greece, and there's a little bit of me that thought, crikey, I wish I could just pop in on Friday and do a quick show. Wish I could pop in and do a quick show. But I didn't, obviously. I'm here now. And I'm here, really, to do what I've been doing for the last 6 years, which is to tell you the truth and to remind you of the facts. Because, once again, this curious cabal of newspapers and dodgy politicians are combining to tell you that black is white, that hot is cold, that up is down. James Cleverly, I think, most perfectly, touring studios this morning, defending, among many other indefensible things, Liz Truss's proposed policy to reverse the national insurance hike. Last year, not like a decade ago or 20 years ago, but last year, James Cleverly voted for that national insurance hike. Not only did he vote for it, but he attacked Labour for opposing it. He literally said Labour just voted against extra funding for social care and frontline NHS services. Wow. And a year later, it's absolutely right that we allow people to keep more of the money they have earned. I don't understand that absence of even the most basic morality. Because it's all very well to change your mind, but why does someone like James Cleverly have to go all in on an idea that he then abandons and goes all in on the abandon? I don't get it anymore. I don't know how these people lie straight in bed at night. And we haven't even got onto the Tory leadership contest yet. So, in the interests of counterfactuals, because the Daily Mail is running editorials about how it's nothing to do with Brexit and it's all Ramona something. So, I mean, who cares, frankly? But you'll have politicians trying to do the same. The Labour Party, of course, has nailed its colours to an invisible mast when it comes to Brexit. They're not going to go near it for reasons that I think probably had more to do with Boris Johnson than the bigger picture. So there may well be cause to regret that. But I think that you listen to this programme in expectation of reality being reflected back at you. And it's very hard now, as you flick through the Daily Telegraph or the Daily Mail or the Sun, it's very hard, or you listen to some conservative politicians, it's very hard to remember what reality actually is. Well, I've got some good news for you. Here's a bloke you may remember. His name is Jacob Rees-Mogg.
There'll be no need for checks at Dover, but it will be an ability to ensure that the roads keep running around Dover, even if there are delays at Calais. The delays will not be at Dover, they will be at Calais.
Let's hear that again.
There'll be no need for checks at Dover, but it will be an ability to ensure that the roads keep running around Dover, even if there are delays at Calais. The delays will not be at Dover, they will be at Calais.
So it doesn't matter what they say, does it? What lies they tell you now? Because another thing to point out, of course, is that if this is the fault of the French, then we haven't taken back control. So it's lose-lose for people like Jacob Rees-Mogg who continue to lie to you. If we've taken back control, then we can fix this problem in Dover. If we haven't taken back control, then only the French can fix this problem in Dover. And Liz Truss gets a front-page newspaper article saying, when I'm Prime Minister, I will tell the French to sort it. That's a bit like me saying, when I'm Prime Minister, I will fly to the moon and back using the power of my own backside. It's just not possible. The French government are not going to... Calm down. Here's Jacob Rees-Mogg, again, lying to you.
There'll be no need for checks at Dover, but it will be an ability to ensure that the roads keep running around Dover, even if there are delays at Calais. The delays will not be at Dover, they will be at Calais.
This is what I mean about James Cleverly this morning. This is also what I mean about having a couple of weeks off and coming back with a true sense of wonderment at how far we've fallen. How does this happen to a country? How can that man end up in the cabinet having displayed publicly a gross failure to understand anything. Have a look at what's happening in Dover. I'm going to play it again. In fact, I might sit here and play it until 1 o'clock, actually, because you dop your calf at this clown. You literally tell me quite often that he's got it all sorted out. He's the clever one. He knows what's going. Here he is talking about delays in Dover.
There'll be no need for checks at Dover, but it will be an ability to ensure that the roads keep running around Dover, even if there are delays at Calais. The delays will not be at Dover, they will be at Calais.
And so why is this happening then? Let's park Jacob Rees-Mogg for a minute. The man understands nothing. Absolutely nothing. Let's park it for a minute and remind ourselves, why is this happening?
As Home Secretary, at this defining moment in our country's history, I have a particular responsibility when it comes to taking back control. It is to end the free movement of people once and for all.
What did you think she meant when she said she was going to end the free movement of people once and for all? Everybody except you? Like there's some magical border that when British people turn up, it only has one side to it? Like the only border in the history of the world that has nobody on the other side? What's on the other side? Narnia? It's like a wardrobe. It's insane. Here she is again telling you exactly what was going to happen in Dover.
As Home Secretary, at this defining moment in our country's history, I have a particular responsibility when it comes to taking back control. It is to end the free movement of people once and for all.
So it's ended. The free movement of people has ended. What does that mean? It means that if you want to get into the European Union from a country that is not in the European Union, you have to jump through hoops that weren't there before. Quite small hoops, but hoops nonetheless. I'm going to apologise in advance for reminding you of the existence of my next contributor, but I think it falls to me to tell you that he was, I think, Secretary of State for Transport at the time. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Chris Grayling.
We will maintain a free-flowing border at Dover. We will not impose checks in the port. It was utterly unrealistic to do so. We don't check lorries now. We're not going to be checking lorries in Dover in the future. Absolutely clear, it cannot happen.
Did they not understand? They didn't. They meant it, didn't they? It's a crisis of intelligence and understanding this. It's not Johnsonian corruption. It's not actually lying. It's not telling you that it's raining outside when we're actually in the middle of a heat wave. They're just so stupid. They're just so thick. That's the only explanation I've got. I'll be inviting yours shortly. But what other explanation can there be? How could they have understood it so little? How could they have misunderstood it all so completely? Well, here's a clue. You remember this fella? Yeah, Dominic Raab. He's still around.
We are, and I hadn't quite understood the full extent of this, but if you look at the UK and you look at how we trade in goods, we're particularly reliant on the Dover-Calais crossing. And that's one of the reasons why, and there's been a lot of controversy about this, but one of the reasons why we've wanted to make sure that we have a specific and very proximate relationship with the EU to ensure frictionless trade at the border.
Well, ice me like a cake and stick a cherry on top. We have quite a high reliance upon the crossing between Calais and Dover. And he's still doing the rounds. He's still likely to be in the cabinet, whichever one of these clowns wins the Conservative contest, the hair ice cream or the gravel sandwich. It's nuts, right? I mean, it is truly surreal. And here is one of the contestants in the race to be the next Prime Minister reminding us that twaddle is still the order of the day.
Well, the fact is that the French authorities have not put enough people on the border. And I'm in touch with the French authorities. I'm very clear that we need to see action from them to resolve the terrible situation that people are facing.
But you can just imagine it, can't you, at the Elysee? Who's on the phone? Oh, Liz Truss is on the phone. She's telling us that we've got to clear up the Brexit mess that they've made. I beg your pardon? She's saying, what, pardonnez-moi? She's saying that we've got to clear up the Brexit mess that they've made. And anyway, finally, Boris Johnson.
The evidence is, Nick, that we would actually increase our exports to the EU if we came out of the legislative morass of the single market.
Even he sounds like he meant it, actually. Even he sounds like he actually believed this stuff to be true. So, 18 minutes after 10 is the time. I should open up the phone lines, although I've got to be honest with you, I could quite happily continue, as you can probably tell, until 1 o'clock today. In fact, I might lock the door, keep Sheila Fogarty in the atrium and talk to you until I actually lose my voice, because we are in an absolute nightmare now. It's a nightmare that many of us knew was coming. It's a nightmare that many of us predicted and explained and described. From the moment Theresa May drew her ludicrous red lines and made withdrawal from the single market and the customs union a requirement, something that she had to do if we were going to abolish our own freedom of movement, this was always going to happen. And it's just a tiny bit, and we'll get through it. But it's, I think, not about the traffic jams in Kent today. What I want you to talk to me about today is this utter failure to understand anything from the people who largely remain in charge. That's the thing I found incredible on holiday. When you're not doing it every day, when I don't have to get up every single morning and come up with a hot take or a pungent analysis or a blistering monologue. I just sit there calmly surveying what's happened. And those clips are perfect, aren't they? Because you can't argue with those. It doesn't matter how brightly polished your Jacob Rees-Mogg badge is. You can't argue with the fact that he told you there'd be no checks at Dover. And everybody who understood everything told you that there would be. You can't argue with the fact that Chris Grayling said there'd be a free-flowing border when everybody who understood anything told you that there wouldn't be. That's the point. You can't argue with the fact that Priti Patel thinks you should celebrate the abolition of your freedom of movement. What's the opposite of freedom of movement? Restriction of movement. What's happening in Dover? Restriction of movement. You voted for this. It's incredible what's happened. It is absolutely incredible. But I still need to come up with a question to ask you. The number you need, if you don't need a question, you just want to start talking to me already, is 0345 6060 973. If I sound a bit odd, it's because I don't know if I want to take calls. I genuinely want to just dance around these clips for the next hour. I just want to hit you again and again and again with the incontrovertible evidence that, not necessarily that they lied to you, but that they understood nothing. Nothing at all. Just one example, because trust me, Dover is tip of the iceberg. One example of the blithe arrogance with which they insisted they were right and we were wrong. That's the point, isn't it? So how did that happen? That's the question I've got for you. How did we become a country where people who have been proven wrong about everything are still in charge? 0345 6060 973. And listen, the Labour Party could be doing this. They've chosen not to. I understand why they've chosen not to. But they could be doing this. They could be hitting you over the head with Jacob Rees-Mogg talking twaddle, with Chris Grayling soiling himself in public, with Dominic Raab humiliating himself yet again on the national stage, with Priti Patel literally boasting about creating the situation that's now brought Kent to a standstill, with Liz Truss having some weird fantasy world where in the French government do what she tells them to do, and Boris Johnson still wibbling on about what a bang-up job he's done as Prime Minister. Yeah, look, I don't do this very often, and I let myself do it once in it. What the hell has happened? What has happened to our country? 0345 6060 973. Explain it to someone who has just woken up from that mythical coma that I sometimes employ when I'm baffled by Britain. Explain to someone who's been in a coma since 2016 what the flip has happened to our country. The people who've been proven wrong about absolutely bloody everything are now competing with each other to see who can be most performatively obnoxious about refugees as a way of apparently becoming the next Prime Minister. Well done, everybody. Well done. 23 minutes after 10. So I think that's it, isn't it? I think that's it. Imagine I've been asleep since 2016 and then reflect upon all of those clips that I've played you. Jacob Rees-Mogg saying there'll be no need for checks at Dover. Chris Grayling saying there'll be a free-flowing border at Dover. Boris Johnson saying exports will actually increase. Priti Patel literally boasting about abolishing your freedom of movement. And then you woke up on Friday, Saturday. When did it all kick off? Anyway, you woke up this week and all of the things that you were told would happen by people who were dismissed and derided and described in very rude terms at times, they're all happening now. Kieran, the van driver, I think he rang Sheila on Friday. I mean, he told us this was going to happen. You know what the bookings are like for British bands at European festivals this summer? They're down about 50%, and we know why. He told us why. It's all happening. And yet the people who got everything wrong are still dancing around television and radio studios asking you to trust them. That's the bit I don't get. Maybe I'm just getting old. I don't know. How can someone like James Cleverly show his face in public to literally champion the abandonment of a policy that he was championing last year? It's as if everything is broken and nothing matters anymore. Blimey. If you were tuning in expecting me to cheer you up this morning, I suspect I owe you an apology. Richard is in Cardigan. Richard, what have you got?
Well, James, I lived in France for 16 years. I've been back for a couple of years now. But when I used to cross over, one of the ways I would sometimes go back was Portsmouth to Le Havre. And I've landed first thing in the morning in Le Havre, and there was nobody on the passport control in France because it didn't matter then. And so now, when I went back in September to finalise the sale of my house, at Roscoff, I went Roscoff this time. There was a queue for the passport control for about 45 minutes. I was one of the first people off because they have to do the procedures.
I think some people need a bit of help here, Richard, and the detail is not necessarily what I want from you. I think I may insist on some sort of psychological analysis of what these numpties have done to us, because if you're only allowed to spend, is it 90 days in a 6-month period in Europe now?
Yeah, that's right. That's correct.
Then they have to check your passport on a level that they didn't do before. Because how else can you prove to them when you got there? How else can they check how long you've been in the country? This is the bit that, and the Daily Mail editorial today is, even by their own standards, it's a masterclass in deception and obfuscation. How can they keep count of how many days you've been in the zone if they don't have a record of when you arrived? So just matching up the photograph to the face, which is, often all that you would need to do in the past, even less than that in some cases, in your experience. Are they pretending not to understand this, or are they genuinely ignorant of these relatively simple facts, or is there something more psychological going on now? I don't get it, Richard.
Well, I think they're just lying, because I saw a clip of Simon Calder, the Independent's travel editor.
Simon Calder, yeah. Absolutely. Doyen of travel journalists. He's been saying it for a while. Of course it's bloody Brexit. What else do you think it is?
No, but he was in Dover at the weekend. I'm not sure. I saw it on YouTube. And he said, I have walked down into the port and I've looked at all of the desks, the French passports. They are all manned. There wasn't an empty desk there. So I
think they were a bit late turning up for work on one day, and they've jumped on that as some sort of reason, when in fact the warning now is that this is going to happen for the entire summer. So, lying maybe? I mean, this is the way the conversation's going to go. It's not bad that I finally get an idea of what we're going to be talking about as the 10:30 news approaches. But this is it now. So those clips, which I'll probably play you again, the experiences that we've all had, and the simple fact that if you're only allowed to spend 90 days in the zone, in the European Union, in a 6-month period, how are they going to be able to keep track of you if they don't have a stamp in your passport to refer to? So it's simple. That's why they're doing it. I mean, in terms of treaty requirements and law, there are more nuanced explanations, but in terms of stuff that is so easy to understand, even James Cleverly could get his head around it. They have to do this to your passport so that they can keep tabs upon how long you've spent in the Union. So how else are they going to do that? Answer, they can't. They might come up with some computer way of doing it. When I came back through Heathrow, it was like using an Oyster card. You use your passport like an Oyster card these days. It will happen, but it will cost money, and it's all been self-inflicted, and it's all unnecessary. So here it is. Here is the question. Are they too stupid to understand what is happening, or are they lying to you? And that might sound like a glib question, but it really isn't. I'm fascinated to know whether you think they're lying to you now, or whether you think that they're too stupid to understand what is happening. Because I'll tell you now that if you have someone who's been in the cabinet for a number of years now, one of Boris Johnson's major cheerleaders, if you have somebody like that demonstrating such a complete lack of understanding of the simplest issues, then I think it is fair to wonder whether the people in charge of this country are too thick to realise what is happening under their own noses.
There'll be no need for checks at Dover, but it will be an ability to ensure that the roads keep running around Dover, even if there are delays at Calais. The delays will not be at Dover, they will be at Calais.
Has anyone seen him today? What's he blathering on about now? It's incredible, the more you think about it, that they are still in positions of power. Raab, still there. Mogg, still there. Patel, still there. Truss, agitating for the big job. Wrong about everything. And on it goes. So, do you think they're lying to you, or do you think they're too stupid to understand what is happening? 0345 6060 973. It's 10:30. Rebecca Cook is here with your headlines. 10:33 is the time. So I'll read you this from the Mail today, and I promise not to make a habit of it, but this is what you're up against. There's two things going on here. The people that have completely screwed our country up accuse those of us who warned against it of being somehow unpatriotic. That's really ugly. That has a very long and grim history in the realms of fascism and extremism. The people who warn against setting fire to your own home get accused of arson. And the people who've set fire to it claim to be the firefighters. You know, like Farage, I suppose, would be the best example. Johnson fits into that category, and the current editorial leadership of the Daily Mail is a case study in it. So everybody knows what's happening in Dover, right? There is very little dispute about it. If you really, really want to bet the house on it all being the fault of the French, then you're going to have to admit that we haven't taken back control after all. So it is lose, 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 lose. The lie about it being the French's fault means that you haven't taken back control, which means all of the nonsense you've been spouting about Boris Johnson getting Brexit done and taking back control falls apart like a cheap suit. So this level of delusion just fascinates me at the moment. Genuinely fascinates me. It's as if they are standing in knee deep in a puddle with torrential rain falling all around them and claiming it's a heat wave. It is absolutely incredible. So here it is with the little headline, Bash Britain Brigade. This time they claim the border chaos at Dover with horrendous queues and travellers to the continent forced to sleep in their cars wouldn't have happened if we'd stayed in the EU. There is just one problem with this analysis. It's hogwash. Since Britain was never in the open borders Schengen area, the French have always checked our passports. In fact, the misery was caused because France, possibly seeking to punish us for Brexit as the summer holiday season gets into full swing, refused to put enough staff on its immigration desks. But why would Remainers let the facts get in the way of their horror story? That would give them one less opportunity to bash Britain for leaving their beloved anti-democratic bloc. So the Daily Mail, either too stupid or too dishonest to realise that they are describing a fictional world, but a world nonetheless in which we have no control, and 6 French people being late for work is enough to bring our economy to a grinding halt. That's what they're telling you. That by taking back control, we've turned Dover into a place where 6 Frenchmen being late for work can bring the entire county to a standstill. And they think that's a win. They think that lie is better than the truth. Why do you lie? You lie because the lie is preferable to the truth. What's the Daily Mail lying about today? The Daily Mail is lying about the reasons for the mess in Dover, the chaos in Dover. And they can't tell the truth. They can't say, well, this is a bit silly, isn't it? We voted for this, and in fact, we told you to vote for this. And people like Jacob Rees-Mogg, as we've proved this morning, told you that none of this could possibly happen. But it's happening. So what can they do? They can tell the truth, or they can lie. But the lie is so awful. The lie is that 6 Frenchmen being late for work can bring the whole of Kent to a standstill after we took back control. So there's your choices. Either the chaos in Kent is a direct consequence of Brexit, spoiler alert, it is, or if you can't admit that because you caused it and contributed to it, voted for it and campaigned tirelessly in pursuit of it, you need to come up with a better explanation. The Daily Mail's explanation for the chaos in Dover, in the whole of Kent, in fact, is that 6 Frenchmen being late for work can now bring our country to a standstill after we took back control. Go on, make sense of it for me. Sue's in Bromley. Sue, what's going on?
Hi, James.
Hello, Sue.
Hiya. So I've got a house about 20 minutes from Calais. And before Brexit, before COVID, I'd be going over there probably 20 to 30 times a year because we run our business from home, and we bought it years and years ago, and we would go over there at weekends because it gets us away from our business.
Yes, of course.
So I can tell you now that there are, at Eurotunnel, because we always travel by Eurotunnel because it's so quick, there are, I think, if I count correctly, 6 booths that there's always been. And generally, you would go through, and quite often the booth would have a green X above it, but the booth would be empty. So you'd drive through and there'd actually not be anyone in there.
Yeah.
Usually then there was someone in there and they'd look up and wave you through. Occasionally, because a lot of Brexiters are saying, oh, we've always had queues. Occasionally we would have had queues, but those queues would be due to things like a strike. They would be due to things like technical issues. When we had a really, really hot summer, I think it was 2018.
They'd be extraordinary circumstances.
Absolutely,
They would be abnormal.
Absolutely. Whereas I went over Friday, we luckily picked a very early crossing before
Well done,
it
you.
actually went crazy.
Yes.
We had a delay of about 2 hours. The booths were actually full. You know, there were passport control men there,
Yes.
so they weren't empty. But the problem is, of course, now, whereas before we'd sail straight through, now they have to stop every car.
Of course they
have to
do.
check every passport.
Because you're only allowed in the union for a
Yeah.
fixed period of time, so they have to check and they have to stamp every passport.
Absolutely. And actually, I'm amazed it's not worse because I've been going backwards and forwards as
Well,
much
don't
as I
tempt
can
fate.
to make up for 2 years' worth of not travelling.
Yes.
And if they wanted to, they could actually sit there and count all my in and out stamps and calculate that I haven't overstayed.
Yeah.
But thankfully, they're not doing that.
Oh, crikey,
Now,
yeah.
I want to make another point. So, since about 2016 onwards, I don't know how much money was spent, but the M20 has been just absolutely ruined. And I feel so sorry for people that have to commute on it because they've done this Operation Brock.
Yeah.
Now, the reasoning behind that was that when there were queues, like we've seen it this weekend with the lorries, they could divert traffic going down to Eurotunnel to Dover onto the northbound carriageway.
Yes.
So they've now got 2 southbound carriageways on the M20. So when we travelled down on Friday, that was actually working. We were diverted. We went onto the 2 southbound carriageways that they've built on the northbound carriageway, and the traffic was flowing. At some point over the weekend, they decided to close it and to divert all the traffic through the villages.
You're
causing
flirting.
absolute
You're
chaos.
flirting with my lifelong animosity towards road-related radio phone-ins here, Sue. I'm just warning you. I'm just warning you.
Look, I'm not going to talk about parking tickets. But my point on
Yes.
this is coming back on Sunday morning, we've sailed up the 2 northbound carriageways of the M20 and the 2 southbound carriageways, which were built to alleviate all that traffic going through all the villages, were empty.
Right.
So why have they spent all this money and done this Operation Brock, and then they're still diverting traffic through the
There'll
country?
be a reason. There'll be a reason, and I can see because you make the journey so often, and if you lived in the area or if you commuted, that would be an area of urgent concern. But I think the bigger political picture is where I'm more concerned today. And so I'd ask you finally, do you think that they are lying, or do you think that they are
Absolutely.
too stupid to understand? So look, Daily Mail today,
not a shadow of a
you've been through that border millions of times. To go to your house in France, you know that quite often your passport wouldn't get checked at all. If it did, they were just matching your face up with the photo, wave you straight through, green lights everywhere. You know that that's true. You have that. That's the evidence of your own eyes
Yeah.
and ears. It's your frequent personal experience. Daily Mail today, there is just one problem with your analysis, Sue. It's hogwash. Since Britain was never in the open borders Schengen area, the French have always checked our passports. It's lying on a level that I thought only happened in books.
It is. It's just complete and utter lying. And you know what? The way they get away with it is because when people go through an airport, you're right, we're not in Schengen. So if you fly out of somewhere like, and I'm just going to pluck Innsbruck out,
Yeah, go on
they
then.
send you into another area because you're not in Europe, so your passport has to be checked, so everybody else doesn't have to have their passport checked. But they didn't stamp it, and you know, they'd
No,
have
they
a
didn't need to.
cursory glance. They'd have a cursory glance. Eurotunnel and Dover were set up in such a way because of the Lutuke
This
agreement
is
that
really
the border
important.
is in UK.
This is really important, what you're saying now.
Yeah, because there was the Lutuke agreement, so the border was set up in the UK. And that's why when Jacob Rees-Mogg said there wouldn't be queues in the UK, he was talking hogwash.
Yeah, but you know, with Rees-Mogg, I honestly don't know. 52% liar, 48% thick as mince on a Monday, 48% liar, 52% thick as mince on a Tuesday. I oscillate between the two, Sue. I truly do.
I've got no more to add on it.
Well,
It's
nor
just-
have I. Thick as mince or barefaced liar. And quite a lot of you are pointing out, quite rightly, that it is not impossible, of course, to be both thick as mince and a barefaced liar. So I don't know how you do it, and I'm not getting any text from the sort of idiots today. How do you do it? How do you listen to Rees-Mogg swearing blind that there would be no delays at Dover, and then you wake up to the fact that there are going to be delays at Dover for the foreseeable future, and quite possibly every summer? Because here's the thing: you need to think about the human equivalent of the just-in-time supply chains. God, it's good to be back from holiday. The human equivalent. So do you remember when we all went on a voyage of discovery about just-in-time supply chains, and we didn't really know what they were? We didn't really have any of the information that we needed to vote sensibly or intelligently in 2016. And I say that as someone who voted to avoid the madness that we're now enduring. But just-in-time supply chains, the idea that the supply chains, the production process was so finely tuned that you were pretty much taking something off the back of a lorry and putting it onto the production line. And if the lorry was delayed for 10 minutes, then the production line would close for 10 minutes. Things were so tight, so tightly controlled, Vorsprung durch Technik. And that was something we didn't understand. This is the human equivalent. So if you now have to keep tabs on every Brit in Europe because we're only allowed to spend 90 days there in every 6-month period, then you have to stamp passports. You have to have a checkable record of movement. Your movement is no longer free. Your movement is restricted. Priti Patel, of course, well, you don't need me to tell you. Why can't we move freely around Europe anymore? Why do they have to check all of our passports at Dover? Here's Priti Patel to remind you.
As Home Secretary, at this defining moment in our country's history, I have a particular responsibility when it comes to taking back control. It is to end the free movement of people once and for all.
So she's done it. She's ended your free movement once and for all, which means your movement is no longer free. I can't believe I have to explain this. Which means that if you want to move between the United Kingdom and the European Union, there are now restrictions in place, which means they have to keep tabs on you, which means they have to check your passport at Dover on a much more high level than they did before, which means that there'll be delays because the port is built in the same way as a just-in-time supply chain was. The whole infrastructure was built to accommodate a population that enjoyed freedom of movement within the European Union. This is why I'm scared today at the scale of the lying now and the continuing deception. The whole port, the entire infrastructure is constructed according to freedom of movement of people. And we have abolished it, which is why the system can't cope. This isn't an opinion, this is counting. So what's going on? Even if all 12 lanes were operating at Dover, which I think they pretty much are now, 17,215 passengers, Nick's done the sums, you're looking at 48 hours per lane to process when it's at peak operation, but that's with 2 minutes per passport. They don't need 2 minutes for each passport. But the point is, if they only take 20 seconds more than they took before, the just-in-time supply chain model means that that's 20 seconds times thousands and thousands of people. Ergo, punters are kipping in their cars. What's more frustrating, the fact that they're still lying to us, or the fact that we did genuinely predict all of this? Every dot and comma, every single syllable of what is happening now was explained on this programme by Kieran, the van driver, and many, many other contributors. Our friend down in Dover who had the import-export firm, the haulage firm, by lorry drivers, everybody. And yet people chose to believe John Redwood, Jacob Rees-Mogg, Nadine Dorries. You chose to believe them when the people who did it for a living were trying to sound alarm bells. And here we are. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. I do generally like it when stuff slots into place live on air. And that combination of lie and truth is incredible, right? Why is the Daily Mail claiming that 6 Frenchmen being late for work can bring Britain to a standstill? Because the truth is even worse. The truth is even worse for them than that ludicrous, transparent, pathetic, piddling lie. 6 Frenchmen being late for work can bring the whole of Kent to a standstill after we took back control. And of course it works for them because they can blame the French. Six French lads who lingered over their croissants and coffees. 6 Frenchmen. That's it. Kent comes to a standstill. Because the alternative is to admit that they got everything wrong. And I don't know how it ends. I genuinely don't know how it ends. I figured on holiday, I was very pleased to miss the Conservative leadership debates. Goodness me, what an absolute nightmare that must have been to cover. But the point is that there makes no difference who wins until they start telling the truth. It's just a competition. It's why Boris Johnson thinks he might be able to come back, because he's broken everything so completely that it's a system in which even an utterly disgraced, disastrous Prime Minister can write an article for the Sunday Express about what a brilliant job he's done and genuinely think he's in with a chance of coming back. It's completely broken. Everything is broken. It's incredible. And those of us who hate seeing the damage that's been done to us, we're the ones that are, according to the Daily Mail, part of the Bash Britain Brigade. It's truly surreal, right? Please stop trashing our country. Please stop corrupting our institutions. Please stop polluting the public space with your pathetic attempts to be even ruder than the other one about refugees. Please just stop it. Stop riding roughshod over the rule of law. Stop having parties when the rest of us... Please stop... Oh, yes, that's the Bash Britain Brigade over there, sticking up for... standards, decency, values. God, they're so unpatriotic with their demands that politicians actually start running things and do a decent job instead of fannying around all day, competing over who can be the biggest liar of all. It is madness. And it's far, far from over. I reckon you've got at least 2 more Conservative leadership elections before you even begin to see a return of reality and rationality to that particular party. Jackie's in Stuttgart in Germany. Jackie, what would you like to say?
Morning, James.
Hello, Jackie.
When you ask if it's stupidity or lies,
Yes.
They're not mutually exclusive, are they?
No, they're not. But in the case of someone like Jacob Rees-Mogg, I think he might be too stupid to lie.
That's definitely stupidity. But no, I just think that the assumption was when they got Brexit done, when they were planning, did they write anything down? Did they actually make a plan? I don't know. But the assumption was that, we're Britain, everything will be fine.
Just pause that.
We'll be
Pause there. Pause. I think that's true. I genuinely think, I remember saying on the programme that it's as if they think borders only have one side.
Yeah, exactly. I think the assumption was that we're Brits, so we'll be able to go wherever we want, whenever we want, however we want, with no impingement, and they'll do all the hard work of keeping the people we don't want out.
Yes. You can control a border.
Semi-permeable membrane.
Yeah.
Notice.
Yeah. Oh, well
We'd
played.
be allowed to go one way, and the French or the Dutch or wherever people were coming into the UK from, they would stop the unwanted, while we would...
But also they wouldn't check on us.
Problem.
They wouldn't check on us. That's the bit...
No, they wouldn't check on us. They wouldn't check our exports. They wouldn't check our imports. Everything would just go swimmingly. And only...
Why?
Why?
You live in Europe. Well, we all live in Europe, but you live in full fat Europe, as it were, the real Europe.
Why? 2020, I've spoken to you before. My dad passed away in October 2020.
I remember. I'm sorry.
And there was, obviously, COVID was going on at the time, but up until then, we'd been travelling regularly through Dover or through Newcastle, and you sort of flash your passport out of the window and on you go.
Hang on. No, there is just one problem with this analysis. It's hogwash. Since Britain was never in the open borders Schengen area, the French have always checked our passports.
Well, they look at them briefly, very briefly, and on you'd go. And coming the other way, it was the same.
You've got this 6-month thing now as well, haven't you? UK passports must have at least 6 months remaining on them before expiry in order to get into Europe.
I've got dual nationality, so I just waved my German
all right.
ID
No one
card
likes to show off, Jackie. No one likes to show off, Jackie. All right?
No, but it means my kids and my husband, we've always been able to travel just on the ID cards.
Yeah,
even coming into the UK, we can't do that now, so we're all going to have to get new passports.
Well, I think they're probably not going to do... The travel in the other direction is the one that Jacob Rees-Mogg has said we can't afford to have checks in place, hasn't he? I mean, on goods, not so much on people. But I suspect it's going to get easier and easier to get into this country, even while politicians compete about who can be most vile about the poor sods coming over in dinghies. It is just hilarious if it was happening to somewhere we didn't like, but the fact that it's happening here is heartbreaking. How do you explain it to your German friends?
I can't explain it to myself. I just think they're all mad. But
they think we're all mad.
Of course they do. We are. I mean, it's when you look at it from the outside, look at what's happening. It's absolutely heartbreaking.
Well, let's try that way. Let's do it that way around. Particularly people who still perhaps cling to the idea that this is nothing to do with Brexit or all a very good idea, or it's all good. It's all good. How do you explain it to someone who thinks you're mad? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. Julian Suffolk calls it innate, arrogant exceptionalism. I guess it's like many other things that we talk about on the programme, is that if you don't have it, you don't get it. Do you know what I mean? It's a bit like being really good at something, like taking free kicks. if you're really good at taking free kicks, you can't quite imagine what it's like not to be really good at taking free kicks. And if you're not really good at taking free kicks, then you'll never know what it's like to be good at taking free kicks. So if you genuinely thought, either subconsciously or consciously, that of course they're going to treat us differently because we're British, I can never fully get inside your head, can I? It's so obviously silly. I have some sympathy for it. You know, the way that our education system used to operate and the maps we had where half the world was pink. I get it. I do understand it a bit. And perhaps you read a newspaper that's constantly telling you that the rest of the world should bow to Britain. But you honestly thought that the rules wouldn't apply? I suppose I need to ask you now whether or not you feel as if you were misled or conned. And they're different things, because if you were misled, then you believed someone who didn't understand what they were talking about. But if you were conned, then you believed someone who was lying to you. So let's go back to the J-Dog. You believed this man, right? So looking back now, do you think he was lying to you, or do you just think that he infected you with his ignorance?
There'll be no need for checks at Dover, but it will be an ability to ensure that the roads keep running around Dover, even if there are delays at Calais. The delays will not be at Dover, they will be at Calais.
So, listen, perhaps you still hate me. You won't, I promise you. The number of people who are submitting apologies and thanking me for keeping the faith even while they didn't is growing every day. But you might still hate me. You might still think, pesky Ramona scumbag and all that sort of stuff. But you believed him when he told you that, and everything else, whether it's about 350 million quid for the NHS or whether it's about an increase in our prosperity. You believed all that. Don't ring me if you voted for Brexit for reasons that you've just dreamt up and have never mentioned before, but now have to pretend are true because the alternative is too shameful and humiliating. You believed Jacob Rees-Mogg. You thought he was a stand-up guy. You thought he knew no one who sounds that posh could possibly be as thick as mince. So I just want to know whether you think he lied to you or whether he infected you with his own ignorance. I'd love to know from someone who is a victim of his rhetoric. Do you think he was lying to you, or do you think he was just a bit thick and you believed somebody who didn't understand what they were talking about and chose to reject all of the people who did know what they were talking about, or the experts, as we used to call them? 10:57 is the time. Sue's in Winchester. Sue, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi, James.
Hello,
Firstly, can I say how amazing it is to have you back?
Thank you,
and
Sue.
a voice
It's nice
of
to be
reason
back.
and sense.
You're very kind. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't want to cut your holiday short, but it's brilliant.
There is just one problem with this analysis, Sue. It's hogwash, but carry on.
I think we've been both misled and conned, quite honestly. I sort of feel that we're being treated as if we are worse than stupid and that we won't see through what they're saying to us. And it's a bit like a small child. If saying what they want to believe, even though they know, they're standing in front of the broken window and saying, no, it wasn't me, I didn't kick the football. To me, it's that sort of analogy. And I just think back to my own children when they were small. And my mantra always was, if you tell me the truth, the consequences will never be as bad as if you lie to me.
I don't want to question your parenting, but is that true? I mean, it's true in the context of your relationship with your children, but if you were the editor of the Daily Mail or the owner of the Daily Mail, telling the truth now about Brexit, the consequences would be much worse than continuing to lie.
I think they would. They certainly would now, but in the initial rounds of sort of the referendum and goodness knows what else.
Oh, of course.
We weren't given any information. It was very difficult to source information, and I've got a husband who spends his life trying to sort of find out information and whatever. We just weren't told. But not only were we not told, we couldn't find information. We had nobody sort of saying, this is what it's likely to be like. This is what it could be like if we leave Europe.
I remember when Kieran first started ringing me. I don't know if you ever heard any of Kieran's calls. I don't know how long.
I have done, yeah.
And he started explaining stuff to us, and he's got a gift of articulacy. He has an ability to put across quite complicated issues in quite a simple fashion. And I think looking back, it may have been a disservice to describe him as Kieran the van driver. We should have described him as Kieran the expert. But it was because it was his daily lived experience that he had such a grasp of the stuff that you quite rightly remind us none of the campaigners knew. And that applies as much to the Remain lot as it does to the Leave campaign. Partly because no one thought we'd leave the single market or the customs union, and no one thought we'd go that mad, but also because they didn't know it either. They know no more about exporting concert equipment to the continent than you do or I do. And yet when you spoke to people like him, and then where he broke the dam, others followed, they told us all of this was going to happen. All of it. Every single syllable of this chaos was predicted and described.
Absolutely, and I, like your previous caller before one, I have a house in France that I've had for a very long time.
Yes.
And suddenly my passport is full of French stamps.
Well, it has to be, because they've got to make sure that you're not there too much or too long. And the idea, as the Daily Mail continues to lie to its readers, that nothing has changed is incredible. I mean, for a number of reasons. A, and most obviously, because if their lie were true, then it would be the case that 6 Frenchmen being late for work can bring Kent to a standstill. But also, of course, because if nothing's changed, then what was the point of Brexit in the first place? Oh, man alive. It's 11:04. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. We continue with this conversation. I've come back from holiday very refreshed. And it means that I sometimes come on air and do things I'd never have the confidence or the energy to do when I'm not feeling very, very refreshed. I mean, it happens on Mondays after I've had a nice weekend, but I know I only put in 3 hours a day, but it's quite high. What's the word I'm looking for, Keith? Intensity, thank you. It's quite high intensity, 3 hours. So I am tired by Fridays. So there's no real question today. It's just a sort of shared sense of incredulity at what's happened to our country. And we are looking at Brexit today, but only through the lens of what's happening in Dover and through the incontrovertible evidence that the people who are still in charge do not know what they are talking about. Incontrovertible evidence. And that's not all that's going on, because, you know, wherever you turn, the NHS is in all sorts of trouble, largely because of staff shortages. That won't, again, be entirely because of the B word, but abolishing freedom of movement of people who could be working here as medics or NHS workers probably contributed, wouldn't you think? It was possible that telling, you know, people from 27 countries that had free movement into the UK that they didn't have free movement into the UK anymore might just have had some sort of impact on how many people from those 27 countries quite fancy the prospect of coming to work for the NHS in this country. Yeah? And then you've got 64% increase in restaurant closures. I think Ben Kentish took a call while I was away, may even have been yesterday, I think, from a cafe owner in Westminster. Just can't get staff. He can't pay more because the business can't sustain that. It just can't get staff. I mean, how many windows have you walked past lately where the signs are going yellow in the window? The staff wanted signs are going yellow. Or full employment-ish, give or take. I think that one of the people who proves Boris Johnson's legacy is likely to be... I mean, imagine looking at the House of Lords with its rather checkered history and thinking, as Boris Johnson did, do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put people in the House of Lords who've got even less right to be there than the ones that are there already. And putting people like Daniel Moylan and Zach Goldsmith and Claire Fox and Daniel Hannan in the House of Lords. I don't know what makes Johnson tick. I really don't. I never have. I never will. But I think making Nadine Dorries Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport probably just gave him a bit of a giggle. He probably just found that hilarious. And that exercise of power, you know, you get people slightly psychotic. You say, why on earth did you do that? And the answer would be, well, because I can. Why did you smash that window? Because I can. Why did you punch that person? Well, because I can. No one can tell me what to do. I'm the king of the world. So in order to prove just how complete my power is, I'm going to make Nadine Dorries Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport. I think that probably tickled him pink. And he's done the same with the House of Lords. Claire Fox, Daniel Hannan, Daniel Moylan, Zach Goldsmith, failure. Stick him in the House of Lords. And anyway, Moylan was on with Kentish. I saw the clip, claiming that the way to solve the labour shortage would be to get retired people back to work. get pensioners back. I mean, you voted for that, didn't you? Because it's very condescending and rude to suggest that people didn't know exactly what they were voting for. Old age pensioners being tempted back into the workforce because otherwise companies are going to go under. How's that going to work? Why are these people still in the public space? I do not know. Oh, Nadine Dorries as well has made a blistering contribution to the public discourse this morning. Would you like to hear it? Liz Truss will be travelling the country wearing her earrings, which cost circa £4.50 from Claire Accessories. Meanwhile, Rishi visits Teesside in Prada shoes worth £450 and sported a £35,000 bespoke suit as he prepared for Crunch leadership vote. That's the Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport, commenting upon the blue-on-blue battle that is unfolding at the top of her own party. That is her contribution to political discourse. One of the most senior politicians in the country. Don't laugh. That's just a matter of fact. One of the most senior politicians in the country. Liz Truss will be travelling the country wearing her earrings. You have to hope, and I mean no offence to Mrs. Truss when I say this, you have to hope she's wearing rather more than her earrings. But that is what Nadine Dorries has written. Liz Truss will be travelling the country wearing her earrings, which cost circa £4.50 from Claire Accessories. Meanwhile, Rishi visits Teesside in Prada shoes worth £450. That's it. That's what they think of you now. It's incredible. Absolutely incredible. Which is why the question that we're looking at today is about the nature of delusion and the question of whether or not you think they lie or whether or not they just didn't understand anything. Because I don't know if you believe anything that's not true, but I think the best example I can come up with would probably be imagine if you told a lie, like a self-aggrandizing little fib when you were like 15 or 16. I think I may once have claimed that I played county-level tennis to impress a girl. I never played county-level tennis. I played for my school team, which was in a county, but I never played county-level tennis. But I think by about my early 30s, I think I believed that I'd played tennis for the county, and I think my mum might have caught me saying it. And she just would have said, this is not a real-life example. I think I did fib about playing county-level tennis to impress a girl once, but I don't think I carried it on into adulthood and got caught by my mum. But pretend I did. It's not impossible. I may have done. And my mum would say, you never played county-level tennis, son. What are you talking about? And I'd go, yes, I did. And I'd mean it. And then I'd stop and I'd go, oh, no, hang on, you're right, I didn't. I said it to impress that girl at Edgbaston Tennis Club. I'd never played county-level tennis. But I believed it in that moment. Is that what they're like now? When they write stuff about let's read it again. There is just one problem with this analysis. It's hogwash. Since Britain was never in the open borders Schengen area, the French have always checked our passports. The misery was caused possibly... This is what they've written. In fact, the misery was caused because France, possibly seeking to punish us for Brexit as the summer holiday season gets into full swing, refused to put enough staff on its immigration desks. So 6 Frenchmen being late for work can bring Kent to a halt. Have people, hundreds of British tourists sleeping in cars because 6 Frenchmen were late for work. That's what they're claiming. Do they believe it? Is it like playing county-level tennis? I don't know, but maybe you do. Maybe you're one of them. Maybe you're married to one of them. Maybe your dad's one. I don't know, but what's going on in their heads now? What would they say if you played them that Jacob Rees-Mogg clip? What would they say? Delusion? Con? I don't know. It's 11:12. Mike's in Portsmouth. Mike, what would you like to say?
It's just following on from your comment earlier of the delusion. I don't think they know. You know, my people in my family are people who were very much, yes, on the morning after we left, we did this, everybody can move on now. And now when you challenge people like that, it's on one moment, one day, a little bit like Jacob Rees-Mogg, Stickers, Mince versus Liar. One day it's, we were told lies by the politician.
Right, but they wouldn't blame him for that, though, would they? They still think he's their man, do they, or not?
Oh, God, I hope not.
No,
but
well, it's your family.
It would be, the next day it would be, we weren't given the proper facts, we weren't given the proper data, so how could we know it? That's
encouraging, isn't it? That's like a flirtation with reality, even if it's not fully consummated yet, isn't it? We voted in ignorance.
Is it? Because, you know, it's like you've reported this morning. People were told. People were told that this would happen.
But they were also told that it wouldn't. That's the point, isn't it, Mike? And now it has. So how do the people who believed the people who said that it wouldn't happen process the fact that it has happened?
You know.
No, I don't know.
There's an awful lot of "I told you so" going on. As someone who worked, the example I always use is I work in logistics, but a good example is things like refrigerant. Who's going to deal with all of the regulations over all of these air conditioning units that we're going to need in the future heat waves and things like that?
I don't think we're going to do
CFCs.
Yeah, we are. I don't think we're. I think this is. I mean, Truss is vowing to get rid of all European Union legislation by the end of next year, whether it's good or bad. It's incredible. I mean, you need to tell us what's bad, and then we'll decide whether we want to get rid of it. Oh, we must get rid of it all because it's foreign. I don't think we're going to check anything. Rees-Mogg's already admitted that they can't afford to control our borders on food coming in. So all sorts of Romanian pork smugglers, I'm told, could be at the front of the queue of people bringing in meat that they can't sell anywhere else in Europe because it won't be checked here. It could get into the food chain here. When do you think, Mike? When do you think the people in your family will actually turn around and say, oops a daisy? They don't need to, sackcloth and ashes. They don't need to start self-flagellating them in Portsmouth Town Square. They don't need to write letters of apology to you and me and everybody else. But when do you think they'll just say, oh, whoops a daisy, I shouldn't have done that?
I don't think they will, because the story is constantly going to be in 5 years, in 10. I've got friends who voted Remain, and when we chat, they're like, it's going to take a while, but any benefits we will see will be in 5 years, will be in 10 years. So there's going to be a lot of, it's coming. It's like a very pregnant Christmas.
Oh, well
where it's never going to...
Any minute now. A bit like the German car industry turning up to stop us from being put into precisely the position that we were then put into. It's about any minute now they're going to come, and then they just didn't turn up and then you never mention them again. You could be right. And, of course, when you've got such powerful media organisations punting absolute nonsense, I mean, and then calling the truth hogwash, then I think that it probably gets sustained. Mike, mate, I don't want to give too much away. I'm visiting Portsmouth soon. Any tips for me? I've never been before.
Yeah, enjoy the seafront.
Is it nice down there? I'm not going to lie to you, Mike. I've heard mixed reports about the salubriousness of Portsmouth. But is there anywhere you'd recommend?
Definitely seafront.
That's
Definitely
it, is it?
Seafront, lovely pubs,
all
lovely
right.
areas in Southsea.
Okay, Southsea.
It's like anywhere, James. We have our corners, but
I think I've heard about the corners. I've heard about the corners. So I'm hoping that I will be able to have a more fully rounded experience of Portsmouth when I pop up there later this year. Or down there even. 16 minutes after 11 is the time. So where are we then? Delusion? I genuinely would love to know. Because, look, I mean, it's over. There's no prospect of us rejoining that's another lie that they'll be punting out there. But my motivation on this, in case anyone's interested, is very, very simply that you cannot clean up a mess while the people who made the mess are still claiming that it's a beautiful construction. Do you see what I mean? If the dog does a whoopsie on the carpet and people who own the dog are still claiming that it's actually champagne or carpet cleaner or something that you want on your carpet. Until you admit that the dog has done a whoopsie on the carpet, you can't clean up the whoopsie on the carpet, can you? That should be self-evident. So that's why I'm so interested in this. Until, for example, you admit that you've absolutely carked our borders, you can't fix it. Because, it's all the fault of the French, or it's this, that, or the other, or it's a Remainer conspiracy. If you're still lying about the mess that you've made, then we can't fix the mess. And that's why the government is in this weird paralysis. And Rishi Sunak now, and we're supposed to be talking about this later in the programme, but I'm not so sure we will at the moment, because I've barely touched the sides of this story so far. Rishi Sunak is describing the country as being in national crisis. Actually, I'll do this when we come back from the break. 10 minutes after 11. How many radio presenters can say this? Two Conservative MPs who've libelled me in the last 2 years are currently arguing with each other on Twitter. If you need an illustration of what blue on blue or a circular firing squad looks like, this is a fairly good one. Sorry to be so self-referential, but you'll allow me a moment of mirth, I think. So Nadine Dorries, Secretary of Culture, Media and Sport, libelled me in a select committee, but unfortunately I can't sue her because she's protected by parliamentary privilege. But Angela Richardson, who's the MP for Guildford, she libelled me when I was on holiday last year. But I can't even remember the details. Someone had used the name James O'Brien on a charity webpage, and she claimed it was me. So I threatened to sue her, and she issued a grovelling apology by tea time that night. And they're now arguing with each other because, and unfortunately, I'm blocked by one of them, so I can only get this second hand. But I have double checked. So that tweet from Dorries I told you about, talking about Liz Truss's earrings, no, me neither, has been answered by Richardson saying, FFS Nadine, ask the kids to explain that to you, FFS Nadine muted. So they're now almost sort of trolling each other on Twitter, these people. And yet, of course, they would both be there claiming, I imagine, that Brexit's all going brilliantly and the queues in Dover are all the fault of Gary Lineker. So how does it break? How does the spell break? I'll play you a couple more clips and then we'll hit the phones again. So here is the... right, first of all, we'll begin with the current Home Secretary, although apparently not for much longer, on why there are now checks and restrictions in place in Dover. Here is a very simple explanation from a very simple person.
As Home Secretary, at this defining moment in our country's history, I have a particular responsibility when it comes to taking back control. It is to end the free movement of people once and for all.
Right, so they've done that. And that means you now have checks at Dover, something which this clown apparently didn't understand.
There'll be no need for checks at Dover, but it will be an ability to ensure that the roads keep running around Dover, even if there are delays at Calais. The delays will not be at Dover, they will be at Calais.
And of course, he was not and is not alone. Thankfully, the ghost of Chris Grayling doesn't haunt us much anymore, but it's still hiding somewhere in the shadows.
We will maintain a free-flowing border at Dover. We will not impose checks in the port. It was utterly unrealistic to do so. We don't check lorries now. We're not going to be checking lorries in Dover in the future. Absolutely clear, it cannot happen.
So, real-life words being spoken by real-life people about real-life issues and being really, really, really wrong, right? Wrong. Rees-Mogg and Grayling. And oddly, by accident, Priti Patel actually explaining why what is happening. We abolished freedom of movement. And I'd urge you not to watch that clip. Just trust me to play it to you on the radio, because some of the expressions on her face as she looks to the camera, having boasted about abolishing your freedom of movement, they might put you off your breakfast. What time is it? Or your brunch. Or perhaps an early lunch. Or just a bag of crisps, your mid-morning snack. Anyway, don't look at the clips. So there it is. That is what is happening. It is because these men did not understand what would happen in the event of abolishing freedom of movement that we have the scenes that we currently have in Dover. So what does the person most likely to be our next Prime Minister have to say about the obvious and incontrovertible fact that the chaos in Dover has been caused by the ignorance of her colleagues? Well, let's find out.
Well, the fact is that the French authorities have not put enough people on the border. And I'm in touch with the French authorities. I'm very clear that we need to see action from them to resolve the terrible situation that people are facing.
So the French have responded to this claim by essentially laughing in a very French way. Oh, ho, 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 for example, would be the French way of they're just laughing at us. They're not angry. They're not having revenge. What did the Daily Mail say? Possibly seeking to punish us for Brexit. Why would the French want to punish us for Brexit? So you punch yourself in the face, and then the French want to punish you for punching yourself in the face. Every Frenchman I've spoken to, and French woman, just sort of looks at the whole story with an air of bemused sympathy. That's all. Bemused sympathy. Even Marie Le Pen, they will say, doesn't want to leave the European Union anymore because of you. Yeah, you left, we watched, we don't want to leave anymore. So why would they need revenge for that? In fact, let's take a moment to just think about that. We've left the European Union, it's going really, really badly, and the French want to avenge themselves on us for doing this thing that's gone really bad. I mean, what goes on in the minds of these people when they write this stuff? It's absolutely baffling. Anyway, Rishi Sunak is currently describing the country as being in a state of national crisis. And I just want to pause for a moment to remind you that Rishi Sunak, until I went on holiday, was Chancellor of the Exchequer. The Conservatives have been in power since 2010. We've had a Conservative Prime Minister since David Cameron arrived in Downing Street in 2010, and yet Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss are currently competing to describe the country in the most catastrophic terms. I probably will get onto that at 12 o'clock, actually, because I want you to tell me what's happened to your party. You don't necessarily have to be a member, but that would be preferable because you get a vote. I mean, I described it earlier as a choice between a gravel sandwich and a hair ice cream.